Chapter 6 is going to be a lot of fun. This has to do with the license law, violations, penalties, and the procedures. So let's get started. And by the way, I might as well go ahead and tell you, out of all the chapters, know this chapter is critical. Let's start out by talking about the disciplinary proceedings and the process. And what this has to do with is that a licensee has had a complaint filed against them. And there are a lot of things that create the legal atmosphere that we go through. Florida Statute 120, the Administrative Hearings, Rules, and Procedures. And as it goes along with Florida Statute 475, the Real Estate License Law, and the way the Commission disciplines. So let's just start out by saying that there's going to be an entire process that I want you to know. Let's talk about the complaint process. To begin with, a complaint is going to be filed by an individual saying that a licensee has done something that they believe to be illegal. That complaint needs to be legally sufficient. In other words, there needs to be a 61J2 rule or a Florida statute that can back it. So once it's filed, there has to be a determination if it's legally sufficient. It'll come through the front door of the Division of Real Estate. The attorneys will review it, and they'll try to find the chapters that it relates to. If they can determine that it's legally sufficient, the next thing that they're going to do is they're going to hand it off to the Bureau of Enforcement. The Bureau of Enforcement is going to be the investigators, and they're going to go out in the field and they're going to do a thorough investigation. What they're basically doing is building a case. They're going to interview people, they're going to gather documents, they're going to do everything that the Enforcement Bureau is supposed to do to build that case. Once they have completed their investigation, they're going to write a report. And that report is going to be delivered to the chair of the Florida Real Estate Commission. At that time, whoever the chair is of the Real Estate Commission is going to appoint 2 commissioners to the probable cause panel. Now let me tell you who these commissioners are. At least one has to be a current member, and at least one has to be a licensed member. And the reason that I say that is that we're drawing off of past members of FREC to sit on this probable cause panel. Once the probable cause panel has been seated, they're going to get all of this information. They're going to pour over all of this. And then they're going to come back to the chair and say, either we found probable cause to exist or not exist. And so what's going to basically happen is that once that is done, and they send back and say, we find probable cause exists, at that point, then there's going to be a formal complaint filed. It'll go back to the attorneys with the Division of Real Estate. And that formal complaint is going to be filed, and everybody's going to get a copy, and the licensee that is involved will become the respondent. And that respondent is going to have 20 days to respond. In other words, they're going to have 20 days to say, I either did it or I didn't do it. They're going to get a certified envelope with a letter, and it'll simply say, check 1. I agree, I disagree. Sign it, date it, and send it back. Once that's done, the issue is this: do they agree they did it, or do they challenge it and say, I didn't do it? If they say, yes, I did it, probably what's going to happen at that point is going to be an informal conference. And all that informal conference is you're going to go before the Florida Real Estate Commission minus those individuals that were on probable cause. And you're going to get to plead your case. You're going to say, hey, look, I did that, but I didn't think I did anything wrong. I didn't think it was that big a deal, or whatever you want to make it as your case. At that point, the Real Estate Commission is going to make a decision. If you decide to check the box that I don't agree or that I didn't do it, then what you're going to have is you'll have a right to a formal hearing and be heard in front of an administrative law judge. You'll have the right to subpoena witnesses, to have documents brought in under testimony. It'll be just like a trial. But at the end of the day, the administrative law judge is going to hand down what he considers to be a recommended order. Now, when that recommended order comes down, both the attorneys at the Division of Real Estate and the respondent can file for a written exception. And let me tell you what that written exception simply means. It means that I'm challenging what that recommended order is, and what you'll get is a hearing before the Florida Real Estate Commission. At the end of the day, you'll probably end up in front of the commission one way or the other. When the commission finally hears everything, it's the commission and only the commission that can hand down that final order. And once it's handed down, it will not take effect for 30 days. Now, here's what can take place in 30 days. You can file with the District Courts of Appeals to be heard for an appeal. As far as the penalties, according to the violation, what the Real Estate Commission can do is they can suspend your license up to 10 years. They can revoke your license. They can place you on probation, and that probation can be indefinite. Let me make a comment about the notice of noncompliance. A notice of noncompliance is typically imposed on brokers, and it's typically because of a minor violation that occurs during a routine audit. In other words, maybe the sign was not in place, or maybe not all the license of agents were in the folder where they're supposed to be. In other words, the notice of noncompliance is a notice where the public is not in harm's way. It's a minor infraction. And as long as the broker makes a correction within 15 days, nothing is going to be said about it. As far as judicial remedies, remember, as far as the Real Estate Commission is concerned, it's either a misdemeanor of the first degree or a misdemeanor of the second degree. A second degree misdemeanor is going to carry a penalty of up to a $500 fine and or up to 60 days in jail. Most violations of 475 are second degree misdemeanors. There are a few violations that are a misdemeanor of the first degree. Once again, they carry a penalty of up to 1 year in prison or up to a $1,000 fine. Remember, violation of rental information laws is a good example of that. Let me talk to you about the recovery fund. The recovery fund is money that is set aside to repay individuals that have been financially damaged by a licensee. But in order to collect money from a recovery fund, that individual first has to go to court and get a judgment. Now, that judgment can fall into two categories: either compensatory damage or punitive damage. Compensatory damage is actual damage, actual loss. Punitive damage is punishment. Treble damages, for instance, is 3 times the actual damage. You may get a judgment for both. The recovery fund will only pay for compensatory damage, in other words, actual loss. So how do they get this money? It's easy. They're first going to have to show that the licensee has assets to pay for it. If the licensee doesn't, they can go to the recovery fund. They also have to show that that judgment has not been satisfied yet. As long as they can show that, and they can show that they were not a participant or a licensee involved in that transaction, there should not be a problem. Now, here's what's going to occur. As soon as money comes out of that recovery fund to pay for damages by a licensee, the license of that licensee is going to be automatically suspended indefinitely until that money is repaid, plus interest. Now, there's only one exception, and that is that if a broker follows a legal order of FREC, such as an escrow disbursement order, and FREC says give the money to the buyer, the seller sues in court, and the judge says, wait a minute, that money should have gone to the seller. Mr. Seller or Miss Seller, you can now go to the recovery fund and get that deposit back, but it's without prejudice to the broker because the broker followed a lawful order. As far as payments to the fund, up to $50,000 for single judgments and up to $150,000 for multiple judgments. And that's all we have in Chapter 6, the license law violations, penalties, and procedures. And what I'd like to do right now, I'd like to move over to our review. Chapter 6, the complaint must be legally sufficient. The investigation is a gathering of facts. The chairman of the Real Estate Commission will appoint 2 members to the probable cause panel. At least one has to be a licensee and the other a current member of the Real Estate Commission. A formal complaint is an outline of all the legal charges with 20 days to respond. A hearing can either be formal or informal. A recommended order by the administrative law judge has to be answered within 10 days of the charges. We call that a written exception. The final order, however, is handed down by the Florida Real Estate Commission, but does not take effect for 30 days. That gives that individual time to file an appeal with the District Courts of Appeal. The notice of noncompliance is a minor infraction where, as long as the broker corrects it within 15 days, nothing will be done. FREC can suspend a license up to 10 years, fine you up to $5,000 per charge, or revoke your license. The state attorney can fine you or incarcerate you. Either a first-degree misdemeanor, which carries a penalty of up to a $1,000 fine and or up to 1 year in the county jail, or a second-degree misdemeanor, which carries a fine of up to $500 and or 60 days in the county jail. The recovery fund only pays compensatory damages, which are actual damages. The recovery fund will pay up to $50,000 for a single judgment and $150,000 for multiple judgments. The license of a licensee automatically becomes suspended until the money is repaid plus interest. And remember, the only exception is if a broker follows a lawful escrow disbursement order of FREC. And that's all I have for Chapter 6's review.